What if everything fans thought they knew about Caryn Chandler wasn't the full story? What if behind the smiles, the calm appearances, and the carefully worded interviews, there was something much bigger being hidden? Because in a twist that sparked intense discussion among fans of Little People, Big World, speculation has begun circulating online, suggesting that Caryn may have found herself at the center of a serious legal situation. One that, if it were ever confirmed, could completely reshape how viewers see her role in the Roloff family dynamic. And it doesn't stop there. Across fan forums and social media, people are now asking a question that's raising eyebrows everywhere. Was Caryn actually caught contradicting herself under oath? And if so, what really happened in that courtroom? Now, before we go any further, it's important to be clear. There has been no publicly confirmed legal case or official record showing that Caryn Chandler has been charged, investigated, or formally accused of wrongdoing. But that hasn't stopped theories from spreading, especially among longtime viewers who have followed her relationship with Matt Roloff and her growing presence in the family over the years. Because let's be honest, Caryn has always been a somewhat mysterious figure in the LPBW world. From her early days working behind the scenes at Roloff Farms to becoming one of the most talked-about personalities on the show, her journey hasn't exactly been simple. And while some fans admire her calm demeanor and loyalty, others have questioned certain moments, interactions, statements, and decisions that didn't quite add up in their eyes. So when rumors of a possible legal contradiction started circulating, it immediately caught attention. Could there be something deeper going on? Or is this just another case of fan speculation taking on a life of its own? Because in today's world, where every clip is analyzed and every word is dissected, it doesn't take much for a theory to spiral into something that feels very real, even when there's no solid evidence behind it. Still, the idea alone has been enough to ignite debate. What would it mean if someone like Caryn, who has maintained a relatively composed and careful public image, was suddenly linked to something as serious as conflicting testimony? And even more importantly, why are so many people willing to believe it? That's exactly what we're going to explore. Because whether this turns out to be fact, fiction, or something in between, the conversation itself reveals something much bigger about the world of reality TV, fan perception, and the thin line between truth and speculation. For years, fans of Little People, Big World have closely followed the ever-evolving relationships between Matt Roloff, Amy Roloff, Chris Merrick, and Caryn Chandler. What began as a complicated love story gradually transformed into one of the most talked-about dynamics in reality television, filled with emotional shifts, family tension, and moments that have kept viewers constantly questioning what's really happening behind the scenes. Caryn Chandler, in particular, has remained a central figure in fan discussions. To some viewers, she appears calm, supportive, and steady, a presence that helped bring stability during a time of major change. But to others, there's always been a lingering sense that not everything is as simple as it seems. Subtle interactions, carefully chosen words, and moments that feel slightly off have only fueled speculation over time. Now, recent fan theories and online conversations are taking things in a much more serious direction. Some are beginning to speculate about a scenario involving courtroom tension, conflicting statements, and even claims that a judge may not have been fully convinced by what was presented. These discussions, while unverified, have added a whole new layer of intrigue to an already complex story, one that blurs the line between reality TV narrative and real-life consequences. But before jumping to conclusions or accepting any theory at face value, it's important to take a step back and examine everything carefully. What exactly are fans seeing that led to these assumptions? Where did these ideas originate? And how much of it is grounded in fact versus interpretation? Because when it comes to this story, nothing is ever as straightforward as it first appears. To understand why Caryn Chandler has become such a debated figure among fans, you have to go back to where it all started, long before she was ever seen as part of the family's inner circle on Little People, Big World. Caryn didn't enter the story as a romantic partner. In fact, Her connection to the Roloff family began in a much more ordinary way. She worked on the farm, Roloff Farms, helping manage operations, especially during the busy pumpkin season. At the time, she was seen simply as a trusted employee, someone reliable, organized, and close to the day-to-day workings of the farm. But even in those early years, fans would later look back and point out something interesting. Caryn wasn't just any employee. She was deeply involved. She worked closely with Matt Roloff, often appearing in behind-the-scenes moments that suggested a level of trust beyond a typical working relationship. At that point, though, Matt was still married to Amy Roloff, and that's where the timeline starts to become important. As the years went on, viewers began noticing subtle shifts. Matt and Amy's marriage, which had already shown signs of strain, eventually came to an end. Their divorce marked a major turning point in the show and in the family dynamic. It was emotional, complicated, and highly public. Not long after, Caryn's role began to change. What had once been a professional relationship between Caryn and Matt slowly evolved into something more personal. Eventually, it was confirmed they were together. And just like that, Caryn transitioned from employee to partner. For some fans, this felt natural. Life moves on, relationships change, and people find happiness in unexpected places. But for others, the timeline raised questions. Because the shift seemed fast. And more importantly, it sparked speculation. Online discussions began to grow. Some viewers started connecting dots, wondering whether the relationship between Caryn and Matt had begun earlier than it appeared on screen. There was no confirmed evidence of overlap, but that didn't stop the theories. And in reality TV, perception can be just as powerful as truth. As Caryn became more visible on the show, stepping into family gatherings, holidays, and major life events, the audience reaction became increasingly divided. On one side, there were fans who appreciated her calm presence. Compared to the emotional intensity that sometimes surrounded the Roloff family, Caryn often appeared composed, supportive, and steady. She seemed to bring a sense of balance to Matt's life. But on the other side, criticism started to build. Some viewers felt that Caryn's involvement in the farm, even before the divorce, gave her a level of influence that made them uncomfortable. Others believed she had become too involved in family decisions, especially those connected to the future of the farm. And then there's the emotional layer. For longtime fans who had followed Matt and Amy's marriage for years, it wasn't easy to accept someone new stepping into that space. Whether fair or not, Caryn became associated with the end of a relationship that many viewers had invested in for over a decade. That emotional attachment turned into skepticism, and skepticism turned into ongoing scrutiny. Every interaction, every conversation, every moment on screen started being analyzed. Fans looked at body language. They revisited old episodes. They compared timelines. Social media only amplified it further, with theories spreading faster than ever. What makes this situation even more complex is that Caryn herself has rarely addressed the controversy in a direct way. She's maintained a relatively low profile when it comes to the speculation, which, ironically, has sometimes fueled even more curiosity. Because when questions go unanswered, people tend to fill in the gaps themselves. And that's exactly what's happened here. Over time, Caryn's presence in the Roloff family narrative has shifted from background figure to central character, to one of the most talked-about personalities connected to the show. Not because of anything clearly proven, but because of perception, timing, and the emotional investment of the audience. And now, years later, those early questions haven't disappeared. If anything, they've grown louder. Because for many fans, Caryn Chandler isn't just part of the story. She's one of its biggest mysteries. This is where things start to take a dramatic turn. Because up until now, everything surrounding Caryn Chandler has lived in the realm of reality TV tension, family dynamics, and fan opinions. But recently, the conversation has shifted into something much more serious, something that sounds less like a storyline and more like a legal drama. It all began with a sudden surge of online discussions. Across fan pages, comment sections, and forums dedicated to little people, big world, viewers started noticing a pattern. Posts began appearing with bold claims, suggesting that Caryn Chandler had been involved in some kind of courtroom situation. The language was dramatic. Testimony, lying under oath, legal trouble. Words that immediately grab attention and raise questions. But where exactly did these rumors come from? From what can be traced, the claims didn't originate from any official report or verified news outlet. Instead, they seem to have emerged from a mix of social media speculation and fan-driven storytelling. A few viral posts, some vague, others more detailed, began connecting dots that may or may not have been there. Certain users pointed to past episodes, interviews, and even body language as evidence of something deeper going on behind the scenes. On platforms like Reddit and Facebook groups, discussions started to evolve. One person would suggest a theory, another would build on it, and before long, a full narrative had taken shape. According to these claims, Caryn was allegedly involved in a legal dispute connected to her past or her role within the Roloff family. Some posts even went as far as to describe supposed courtroom moments, suggesting she had been questioned or caught in a contradiction. And that's where things get complicated. Because despite how detailed some of these stories sound, there is no confirmed public record of any such court case involving Caryn Chandler. No official filings, no verified reports, no statements from the family or the network confirming any legal issue of this nature. What we're seeing instead is a classic example of how quickly speculation can evolve into something that feels real, especially in a community as invested as the fanbase of Little People, Big World. And yet, the intensity of these rumors can't be ignored. Fans are asking questions. Why now? Why are these claims surfacing at this moment? Some believe it's tied to the growing scrutiny Caryn has faced over the years, her transition from farm employee to partner of Matt Roloff, and the tension that followed within the family. Others think it's simply the result of viewers revisiting old moments with a new perspective, looking for hidden meaning where there may be none. Still, the idea of a courtroom reveal has added a new layer of intrigue. It transforms speculation into something cinematic, something that feels like a hidden chapter waiting to be uncovered. But as of now, it remains exactly that, speculation. No verified legal documents, no confirmed court appearances, just a rapidly spreading narrative fueled by curiosity, suspicion, and the power of online communities to shape a story in real time. And perhaps the most important question is whether these rumors are true. But why so many people are ready to believe them? This is where things begin to shift, from speculation into something that feels much more serious. Because once the phrase, lying under oath, started circulating among fans, the conversation changed completely. Now, before going any further, it's important to understand what that actually means. Lying under oath, also known as perjury, is when someone knowingly gives false information while legally sworn to tell the truth. It's not just a small mistake or a misremembered detail. It implies intent. It suggests that someone deliberately tried to mislead in a formal setting, like a court proceeding or legal testimony. And here, where things get complicated. Because as of now, there is no publicly confirmed court case or legal record proving that Caryn Chandler was ever under oath in the way these rumors suggest. But that hasn't stopped the theories from spreading. In fact, for many viewers, the idea didn't come from official documents at all, it came from something much more subtle. Viewers began noticing something strange. Small inconsistencies. Moments that didn't quite match up. Statements made at different times that seemed to tell slightly different versions of the same story. At first, these details were easy to overlook. After all, reality TV is heavily edited. Conversations are cut, rearranged, and sometimes even taken out of context. What we see isn't always a full, continuous timeline. But over time, certain fans started paying closer attention. They went back, rewatched old episodes, compared interviews, analyzed social media posts, And that's when things started to stand out. Statements that didn't quite line up. For example, in earlier appearances, Caryn often described her role in the family in a very careful, measured way, emphasizing boundaries, timing, and respect for existing relationships. But in later interviews, some fans felt that her descriptions shifted slightly. Not drastically, not in a way that immediately raised alarms, but just enough to make people pause. Was it a natural evolution of her perspective? Or was it something else? That question became the center of the discussion. And it didn't stop there. Fans also began comparing how different members of the family described similar events. Moments involving Matt, Amy, and Caryn, especially during the transition period when relationships were changing, became a focal point. Some viewers believed that certain timelines didn't fully align. Others pointed out differences in how events were framed. One person would describe a situation as gradual and respectful, while another seemed to hint at overlap or tension happening earlier than expected. And that's when the theory really took off. Online forums and fan pages started connecting these dots. Clips were shared side by side. Quotes were pulled from interviews years apart. And a narrative began to form, not based on confirmed facts, but on perceived inconsistencies. To some fans, these differences were enough to raise serious questions. They began to wonder, if the story has changed over time, which version is the truth? And more importantly, was anything intentionally misrepresented? That's where the phrase, lying under oath, started being used, not as a confirmed legal accusation, but as a dramatic way of expressing doubt. A way for fans to say, this doesn't add up. But here's the critical distinction. There is a huge difference between a legally proven case of perjury and fans noticing inconsistencies in public statements. One is a matter of law. The other is a matter of interpretation. And in this situation, everything we're seeing falls into that second category. Still, the power of perception shouldn't be underestimated. Because once viewers begin to question credibility, even small inconsistencies can take on a much larger meaning. Every interview gets re-examined. Every comment gets analyzed. Even body language starts to become part of the conversation. Re-examining interviews show clips and behavior. Fans pointed to moments where Caryn appeared hesitant when answering certain questions. Others highlighted scenes where conversations felt slightly uncomfortable or incomplete. Some even interpreted pauses or changes in tone as signs that something was being held back. Now, to be fair, these interpretations are highly subjective. What one person sees as hesitation, another might see as careful communication. What one viewer interprets as inconsistency, another might see as growth, reflection, or simply a different way of telling the same story. But in the world of reality TV, perception often becomes reality for the audience. And once a theory like this gains traction, it can be very difficult to contain. Because people aren't just watching anymore. They're investigating, comparing, questioning, looking for patterns, and sometimes seeing connections that may or may not actually be there. So where does that leave us? At this point in the story, there's no confirmed legal wrongdoing, no verified court testimony, no official evidence of perjury. What we do have is a growing wave of speculation fueled by small details, shifting narratives, and the natural curiosity of a deeply invested fan base. And whether those inconsistencies mean something significant or nothing at all, that's still up for interpretation. But one thing is certain. Once viewers start asking questions like these, it changes the way every moment is seen moving forward. Because now, it's not just about what's being said. It's about whether people believe it. This is the moment where the narrative takes on a life of its own. Because once fans began questioning inconsistencies, The conversation quickly shifted from speculation to imagination. What would actually happen if these contradictions were presented in a real courtroom? To understand that, we first need to step back and look at how judges typically handle situations involving conflicting statements. In any legal setting, consistency is everything. When someone gives testimony, especially under oath, the expectation is clear. Every statement must align with facts, prior statements, and available evidence. If something doesn't match, it doesn't just raise eyebrows, it raises serious legal concerns. A judge in that situation doesn't immediately jump to conclusions. Instead, they observe carefully. They listen. They compare. Because contradictions don't automatically mean deception. Sometimes they come from confusion, misremembering, poor wording, or even pressure in the moment. But when contradictions begin to stack, when multiple statements don't line up, that's when things start to shift. That's when a judge may begin to take a more active role. They might ask clarifying questions. They might revisit earlier testimony. They might even allow attorneys to re-examine the witness in greater detail. And this is exactly the kind of scenario fans have been imagining. The courtroom is silent. There's a pause after a key statement is read aloud, one that directly conflicts with something said earlier. The tension is immediate. A judge leans forward slightly, reviewing notes, replaying the timeline in their mind. Then comes the question. Calm, direct, precise. Can you clarify this discrepancy? It's not aggressive. It's not emotional. But it carries weight. Because in a courtroom, tone doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. The focus shifts entirely to the response. And this is where things can become uncomfortable. If the answer is unclear, or doesn't fully resolve the contradiction, the situation intensifies. Another question may follow. Then another. Each one narrowing in. Each one removing room for interpretation. Not to intimidate, but to establish clarity. Because that's the judge's role, to get to the truth or as close to it as possible. Fans who have followed this situation closely often describe this imagined moment in very dramatic terms. Phrases like, "the judge shut it down," or "the judge destroyed her argument," started appearing across comment sections and forums. But what do those phrases really mean? In reality, judges don't destroy people in the way social media might suggest. They don't deliver dramatic speeches or emotional takedowns like you might see in movies. What they do is much more subtle, and arguably much more impactful. They dismantle inconsistencies through logic. They highlight contradictions by simply placing statements side by side. And in doing so, they allow the facts to speak for themselves. In this dramatized version, you can imagine the moment where earlier statements are brought back into focus. A timeline is revisited. Words are compared line by line. And suddenly, what once seemed like minor inconsistencies begin to look more significant. Not because of emotion, but because of clarity. The more precise the questioning becomes, the harder it is to maintain a narrative that doesn't fully align. And that's where the tension peaks. Not in shouting, not in confrontation, but in silence, in pauses that feel longer than they are, in moments where every word matters. This is also where perception plays a huge role. From a viewer's perspective, especially one already skeptical, this kind of exchange can feel decisive, even if the reality is more nuanced. A judge asking repeated clarifying questions can be interpreted as doubt. A request to revisit testimony can be seen as disbelief. And when those moments are taken out of context or retold through discussion, they can quickly evolve into something much bigger. That's how phrases like, "the judge destroyed her," begin to take shape. Not from a single moment, but from a collection of interpretations. From the way people felt watching similar situations unfold. From the assumption that tough questioning equals a final judgment. But in truth, A judge's role isn't to win against someone. It's to ensure that every statement is tested, every claim is examined, and every inconsistency is understood. Still, the idea of that imagined courtroom moment continues to fuel discussion, because it represents something deeper than just legal procedure. It represents accountability. It represents the moment where narratives are challenged and where clarity becomes unavoidable. And whether or not this exact situation ever happened the way fans describe, the fascination with it says a lot about how audiences interpret behavior, about how quickly speculation can evolve into belief, and about how powerful the idea of being confronted with the truth really is. As the conversation continues, one thing becomes clear. This isn't just about what was said or what may have been contradicted. It's about how those moments are perceived, and how, in the absence of confirmed facts, people begin to fill in the blanks themselves. Sometimes with logic, sometimes with imagination, and sometimes with a version of events that feels just real enough to believe. At the end of the day, what we're witnessing isn't a confirmed courtroom scandal, but a clear example of how quickly narratives can take shape and grow within a passionate and highly engaged fan base. The idea that Caryn Chandler may have been caught lying under oath appears to be driven more by speculation and interpretation than by any verified legal record. Still, it reveals just how closely viewers are paying attention, analyzing every moment, every statement, and every interaction for deeper meaning. Whether these theories hold any real truth or simply reflect the way audiences connect the dots, one thing remains undeniable. The story surrounding the Roloff family continues to fuel curiosity, spark debate, and stir strong emotions among fans. And in a world where perception can sometimes feel just as powerful as reality, the line between the two isn't always easy to define. With that said, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.